Hey YouTube, Matt back with part 2, the finale of the shop vac cabinet. I have things upside down, as my wife will tell you is common for me, because I'm going to put some wheels on this thing. Yeah, the shop vac had wheels when I started this, and I don't expect to drag this around as much as I had to drag the whole shop vac necessarily, because I'm going to have lots of hose and it attaches up high. Nevertheless, I do want to be able to move this, to sweep behind it, to get the vac in and out, or, you know, if I have to take it to the other corner of the shop or some such thing. So I picked up ye old Harbor Freight 3-inch casters. Each one of these things holds 175 pounds or some such thing, so they're way more than adequate for the job. I am going to pre-drill the holes for the screws just because I really don't want this plywood to split or crack. I want them to hold as well as they can. Alrighty. Next thing I want to look at is the front. This slot at the top is the vent where the air finally comes out. What you see down here is the actual beginning of where the tunnel for the silencing happens. So the front of this cabinet goes about like so. The panel's all cut to size, but the one thing I have to do yet is make the hole for the PVC and coupling to go through here. It's pretty much centered on the vac, so I'm just going to measure down from where I want the top of the front to be and center it and drill a hole right smack dab in the middle of this. Okay, so right here is our starting point, and I have pulled the vac out so that I can get at the hole as well as I can. The hole on the vac runs from 10 inches down to 11 3/4 inches down. And the panel is 27 inches wide. So if I line up the tape with the two marks, 13.5 is my midpoint. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a hole saw or a circle cutter big enough to cut this thing out. And of course, exactly where I need this hole is about 1/2 inch of depth that I don't have even on the brand new giant drill press. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, drill out a couple starter holes and cut it with the jigsaw. But fortunately, the cabinet that I'm making is the perfect work height and width for using as a workbench for this particular piece. So off we go. Before I unclamp this, I'm going to just finesse it a little bit. This is a double-sided rasp. It's flat on one side and round on the other. It's got a real aggressive end, which if you take that to plywood, you will scrape all the veneer off the far side. So slow going, but stick with the gentle end on these things. Once the hole's cut in the front to let the PVC through, the whole front panel needs to be glued onto the cabinet, and it needs to line up fairly critically with this piece that divides the two pieces of the tunnel. The easy way to do that is just lay the whole thing down on its back, glue it in place, and use some brads to tack it down if you don't have clamps, like me, that are big enough to hold it the whole way around. With the front glued on and setting up, I can turn attention to the interior of the cabinet and the back pieces that go on. There are actually two separate pieces for the back. There's this little piece that makes the back of the tunnel where the air comes out, and then there's the piece that's actually the door where the shop vac goes in and out. For the cabinet itself, I went with good old-fashioned carpet padding. It's an idea I got from one of the subscribers, thank you very much. And it sure enough is about the cheapest padding you're gonna find anywhere. I looked at the craft stores at the price of foam, and the carpet padding was about an order of magnitude cheaper. So at the moment, I have one layer in here. We'll see. I can always come back and put more in here. For the back part of the air duct, I went even lower tech. This is an old towel that I don't honestly remember. What's the last thing I wiped up with? It was probably dog feet. But anyway, I'm just going to staple it to the back of this board and then glue the board on the back of the air duct. Have to do a little bit of wiring before we put the vac into the cabinet. I chose to cut up an old extension cord to become the cable that feeds this whole apparatus. There's a box mounted on the outside here where the power comes in. The neutral, the white wire, just goes straight through to the inside. But the hot, the black wire, is going to get switched, and the ground goes through to the outlet, but I also needed a little pigtail so that I could ground the switch. Now that we have a way to get power into this contraption, what I did is I took the rubber coupling off the end of the PVC that goes up and stuck it through the hole from the inside. It's cut to fit, so the rubber coupling will go through, but the hose clamps won't. So I had to take this hose clamp off and stick that in there. What I'm going to do is flip it around again, put the vacuum in, and plug this in to the front of the vac, just so that I'm sure that everything's going to line up when I go to put the PVC back on here. And with the vac inside the cabinet, we can put the PVC back together and tighten up the clamps on the couplers. Home stretch, guys. The vac is back in the cabinet. All the plumbing is in place. Clamps are down. I obviously still have to put the back door on here. Before I do that, I want to plug it in and double check my wiring. Now that we know everything works, we can safely put the hinges on the door. And then on the far side, the door is held closed with these nice little flippy latches. Just in case I ever want to padlock my shop vac in here. Well, there you have it, YouTube. One shop vac silencing cabinet and dust deputy holder. I still need to trim this thing out. I need to build some little brackets to hold the tubes and attachments to the shop vac. I gotta put something back resembling strain relief here so the hose isn't pulling on the bucket lid all the time. But for the most part, this thing is back to functioning. And more importantly, it's to the point where we can find out how good is it in terms of silencing. I have a ye old handy dandy decibel meter here on the phone. And I will tell you, I guess I should have done this on camera. I took a reading with the shop vac just out in the open here in the shop. And I got about 90 decibels. Of course, it depends exactly where you move. Stuff reverberates around and, how close you are to it. But I was standing, pretty much next to the vac, sort of in this corner. And 90's an average. So right now, let me be quiet for just a second and see what the dead silent reading is. Dead silent reading is about 27 decibels in here. It's pretty quiet. The lights and the cameras don't make a lot of noise. Moment of truth. Let's flip it on and let's see what the reading is with it in the cabinet. That is a whole lot quieter. I'm not going to fool with the levels of the audio in post-processing. What you're hearing is the mic with me standing right here. and I'm getting about 70 dB, 70 to 75, depending on exactly where I move. And again, I'm standing right next to the thing. So that's 15 to 20 decibels quieter than it was before. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the decibel scale, it's logarithmic. So minus 3 dB is about a half power technically drop. Your ear perceives 10 dB as half the volume. So this is as much as 20 dB quieter, which means it sounds only about a quarter of the volume that it was before. And bear in mind that some percentage of the sound that comes out of this rig is the air flowing through the hose, the air going in the end of the nozzle. There's a portion of this that we didn't do anything about. All we worked on was the motor itself. So I am very happy with the results of that. It certainly is much, much more pleasant to listen to, even if it potentially could be quieter. It's a much nicer sound. The high frequency, the whine is totally gone. What we're left with is mostly just the sound of the moving air, which is lower in frequency, a little more constant, definitely easier to take. So I'll call that a wrap. You'll see some of the little tweaks and improvements to this thing in the background in future videos. That's all we're going to do in terms of dedicated time working on this project. As always, thanks for watching and stay safe, YouTube.